WINN is 98.9. 98.9 is Win FM.
Well, a very good morning to you. Time now to welcome you to Inside the News on Win FM 98.9. Inside the News broadcast on Saturdays and rebroadcast on Sundays. On to this program, we're very happy to have with us the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Timothy Harris, as well as the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws. We'll continue our discussions on the country's response to COVID-19. That's coming up in just a moment, but first of all, we want to say a very good morning to our colleague stations that are taking this broadcast. And of course, we're on many platforms on YouTube, Facebook, and of course, via the old-time radios, you used to know it. Let's say a very good morning now to our sponsors, The Cable.
As social distancing becomes the norm of our everyday life, The Cable wants you, our customer, to know that we are here for you every day. Just log into us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Send us your feedback at email customerservice@thecable.biz. Visit our website www.thecable.net. It's also nice to know you can pay your bills at a distance, online at all commercial banks, or at www.thecable.net/pay. Now's the time to try online banking. It's ultra easy. Call us at 465-2588, 662-7742, or 763-0184. The Cable. We're here for you.
Well, a very good morning to you once again. I'm Clive Backus, and with me I have Trent Sargent providing technical support. We're happy to be in the company of the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis and the Chief Medical Officer. As is our tradition, we'll begin first of all with a statement from the Prime Minister, then we'll hear from the Chief Medical Officer, then we'll pose a few questions, and then of course we'll be happy to hear from you on our telephone lines, which I'll announce when the time is right. In the meantime, we go now to the Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Clive, and good morning to all who are tuning on Radio Land and TV Land. Thanks for taking the time to be part of this informative session.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and a very good morning to Dr. Hazel Laws. Dr. Laws, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Backus, and thanks for having me here this morning.
Well, it's good to see both of you are awake. I don't know, do you sleep?
Not as much, not as much, not as much.
Well, I know.
I'm working on it.
I know we have a lot of work to do, and of course, I commend you for finding the time to come here to answer questions and to interact with the public. So without any more from me, let's go to the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Timothy Harris. Dr. Harris, your opening comments.
Thank you very much again, and good morning to all my fellow citizens and residents. It is a pleasure, once again, to use this forum to have an interactive conversation with the people of St. Kitts and Nevis and all our well-wishers at home and abroad. This week has been an important one. Today we mark the 21-day period for the curfew, which we started sometime in March by regulation number 7. And today we are, in fact, at regulations number 14 of 2020, the statutory rules and orders, emergency powers COVID-19, number 5 regulations. We have, over the last 21 days, had our lives turned upside down, in a manner of speaking, as a result of a pandemic which originated in Wuhan, China, so far away from us that none of us had anticipated that it would reach into the Americas with such rapidity and intensity. But that is now ancient history. The reality is that the worst pandemic ever in the world, certainly the most significant one in living memory, is now with us. And it has been moving so swiftly and unpredictably that the world order has changed. The health systems that were considered among the best are now in turmoil. We only have to listen to the news coming out of United States of America, coming out of United Kingdom, coming out of Europe, coming from every region of the world to understand that this is no laughing matter. The reality is, and if I could get from the CMO the situation analysis report, is that as of Friday, 17th April at 3 p.m., over 2,078,605 cases of COVID-19 were confirmed. It has left in its pathway 139,515 persons. In other words, in the short of a couple months, because this was declared an emergency health challenge of international concern on or around January, if not the end of December, and within a few months, 139,515 persons have died, and several thousands more are in hospitals, in ICUs, and in other wards. And we have hundreds of thousands more who are unable to make it to hospitals because the hospitals in the underlands are, as it were, overcrowded and bursting to their seams. And even if they were to get to that destination, there is a shortage of critical equipment, both for the health givers, providers, and for those who will be there as patients. I say that to, as it were, bring and highlight the serious pandemic which we are dealing with. 139,515 people dead is like 3 times the size of St. Kitts and Nevis population loss. So if we could put that in this context, and therefore we in St. Kitts and Nevis have to be very careful. I am grateful and thankful that God has blessed us so far. And while we would have wished in the ideal situation that there will be no confirmed cases, the reality is that we have 14. But to God, we give the honor. We have no deaths so far. And we have been doing our very best to lead the way and to lead the region with respect to this fight against humanity that the COVID-19 represents. I want to use the opportunity to thank all the essential workers, in particular those at the front line, our health practitioners, our nurses, those who drive our ambulances, those at immigration, at customs, the defense force, the police, and all the other agencies too numerous to mention, those at NEMA, and the members of the National Emergency Operating Center and our Health Emergency Operating Center are among the thousands of persons who I must thank. Equally, I want to thank the vast majority of people for St. Kitts and Nevis, who over the last 21 days, were able to come to terms with the fact that we are in a new world. We may protest against it. We certainly don't like it. It has been inconvenient for all of us, and it has been a difficult experience for many, for our elderly, for those who have been put out of work through no fault of their own, for those who are on reduced wages. All of us have suffered, and your government has suffered too, because your burden becomes our burden. Your fears becomes our fears. Your needs are what we respond to every day. And so to ensure that we can move forward, the government from day one indicated that we will spare no resource to be able to ensure that St. Kitts and Nevis fight this fight with all it has. Fight the fight with every intention of winning. 21 days after, the fight is still going on, and we have not yet won. Many have been battered and worn down, but our spirit of resilience, of commitment, of resourcefulness, they live on. And we are prepared to fight every day with all the sinews in our body to ensure we defeat COVID-19. And we have set ourselves as a government and people the aspirational goal that St. Kitts and Nevis will be the first or among the first in the region to successfully defeat COVID in our jurisdiction. Now we go to what happened yesterday. What happened yesterday was that we went to the Parliament, the fulcrum of democracy, to get the support of the Parliament as the emergency powers require that we do, and the Constitution, to be able to extend the Emergency Powers Act and the regulations attendant to, referred to as the Emergency Powers COVID-19 regulations. And we successfully had the 2/3 majority in the House. Indeed, with the absence of the vacating of the seat of the member for number 6, with the long-term absence now of the Senator Nigel Carty. It was, and the absence yesterday too, at the time of voting, of the Honorable Patrice Nisbet. We went well over the required 2/3 majority to pass, and we were happy that we were able to. Why did we need it? So many people are exposing themselves at the front line. The health practitioners, the nurses, those who are working in the health systems everywhere, in every health center, in every of the 4 hospitals in St. Kitts and Nevis, our police, all of them need to ensure that they have every tool and every asset in our arsenal to be able to wage a winning war against a powerful, invisible enemy. And the state of the emergency powers and attendant regulations are critical in the fight against COVID-19. COVID-19 in large respect depend upon people using their common sense and their good sense to act. But in every sphere of human endeavor, there are going to people who will not do the right thing, because at times doing the right thing is difficult to do. Doing the right thing sometimes requires you to stand alone in defense of principle. And so if in the state of where we are now, persons determine, well, I am not going to take on the doctors, I am not even going to bother with the police, I am going to have a black party on the street, I am going to go to the beach because I am free to do what I want in this country, and I will have this party and all this fun. And the more people congregate, whatever the occasion, the increase in the risk of the transmission of the COVID-19. And one of the strategic plans outlined by the health professionals is that we have to minimize the probability of transmission from one human being to another. And that calls for a number of things to be observed. The social distancing and physical distancing, people keeping a safe distance between themselves, people taking conscious effort to boost their immune system by proper rest. And you ask a pertinent question. Sleep is part of that. Dieting, healthy intakes of vitamins and fruits, etc. All those things are going to put us in a better way. Hand hygiene in particular, but sanitary practices in general all now become crucially important. And of course, the ability of the state to respond quickly, to move people from point A to point B, and to require people to disperse for any length of period of time could only come with the support of the emergency powers. So no one in St. Kitts and Nevis, in my view, having regard to where we are at, having regard to what is happening in the world, and they see it in every news item, no matter what TV channel they go to that deals with news, know that when the emergency powers ended think it was this morning, at 6 o'clock, there was no way that the government could leave the people of St. Kitts and Nevis exposed to the whims and fancy of the other individual. Because no matter how much I protect myself by wearing my mask, by observing social distancing, by communicating with my God at home on my knees at my bedside, or through television, or participating virtually, so long as there are others not observing these practices, there is a risk to me. And that is why the state need the powers of coercion, if you will, to discipline people and to provide the consequences for people not adhering to proper rules in the public interest. And the public interests at this time are of twofold. Predominantly a public health pandemic. None can argue it because it is clearly all over the world. And I want to make the point anyway and repeat it. No country stands alone. So even if St. Kitts and Nevis were to be the first to achieve its aspirational goal, and Antigua is not, and St. Martin has not, and Guadeloupe has not, and America has not, we are not yet out of the woods. And the clear message from every knowledgeable health professional and COVID czar is that no one truly knows when the course will be clear. What persons are saying to government and to those who are policymakers, we have to go about it in a very slow way. Even this morning I listened to the Director General of WHO, Dr. Tejas, and he was saying that he is aware that countries are wanting to move apace, to get, as it were, to the next phase of operation, to a greater an enlargement of freedoms hitherto constrained. And he's saying, yes, each country has to know what it is doing, but please go slowly. It has to be a gentle process, learning as you go, taking the tender steps, one step at a time, and evaluating the success of that measure. Whether you need to club up what which you have done, it is a season and a period of trial and error. And we and every country will have to go through that phase of trial and error, being agile enough and quick enough to be able to make the changes. That is what these powers, the emergency powers, allow us to do. So if there was, for example, something significantly untoward happening on Monday, when we release some of the restrictions, remove some of the restrictions. So Monday, for example, and Tuesday, you can go out if you are compelled to. You can come into Bastia, whatever your zone, but come only if necessary, because we still want you to stay at home unless there's a compelling reason. Now, the reason may be for medication. The reason may be that you have to work. And we could have legitimate purposes, but it can't be that I come in town to lie. We do not want that. In fact, we will insist that there be no loitering on 4th Street and on any street in Bastia and in any community. You must come out for a reason, because the stay in shelter is still a critical matter to contain things within particular physical abodes or households. So if something were to happen, what this power that we got yesterday to extend the curfew, the emergency powers for a period of 6 months, what it does, it gives us an additional tool to help fight the pandemic. It is necessary and it was imperative that we do so. And clearly, informed Kittitians and Nevisians, when they listen to Jamaica, they hear that they are exercising emergency powers. Jamaica suddenly had about 30 plus cases discovered in one call center. And what was the response of the government, among other things? The one that made the headlines was that the Jamaican government immediately executed the powers of the state of the emergency, locked down the parish affected so that you could contain the movement of people in and out, and therefore minimize the spread of the transmission of the virus, for which up to today, at least this morning, there was no known vaccine or therapy. None at all. This is a strange place to be. And that is why we must never relax our guard. And the commitment of the Team Unity administration is that health comes first. Yesterday we had something oil being poured in the water, where some persons attempted to confuse people. This was an effort to delay elections. I want to make it clear that what we did yesterday has nothing to do with general elections. I want to make it further clear that elections are not on the mind of the Prime Minister at this time. And only the Prime Minister, according to the Constitution, will be able to determine when the elections are called. I could not dare to be thinking selfishly and conveniently about the general elections when people's health are basically at risk. In the face of a pandemic, we couldn't seriously be thinking about holding public meetings to expose people when one of the critical truths or best practices is that people have to be apart. In the context of the way in which we campaign, that would be anathema for this to happen during the course of a campaign. And so my priority, my government's priority, the priority for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis is to allow the government to do its work to get the country to a safer space. Yesterday I used the metaphor of crossing the Red Sea in biblical times, crossing that sea out of Egypt into Canaan land, the land of prosperity and the land of safety. That is the challenge now, and that is what is operating on my mind, inspired by the hard work of people like Dr. Hazel and Dr. Cameron Wilkinson and Dr. Liddy and the permanent secretary and all those people in health who are sacrificing daily. And because I see them sacrificing, I know as the leader, my sacrifice must be even be greater, because leadership comes by example. And I want to inspire the people of St. Kitts and Nevis in this period of difficulty, which we are easing. Already then, you can see that we have no interest in delaying anything, because we are working out, easing, getting the country to normalcy. And if next week goes beautifully, people conduct themselves well, 99% of the people on the street come out with their masks of any type, and we have masks in abundance now. Sun Island can produce, by my own calculation, 10 to 15,000 masks per week. We have a mere 50,000 people, and some are already taken care of in the health sector, in the security. So everyone can. And if you don't want to buy those, you can certainly wear your own. So this is where I want to end my opening remarks by thanking the people of St. Kitts and Nevis for clearly, had it not been that the 21-day period, and Dr. Laws could speak some more of that, had brought sufficient success, the health personnel who have been advising us would not have been able to come to say, Mr. Prime Minister and your cabinet, these are options available to you. Ultimately, the government takes responsibility for the advice. For in a democracy, the deciders are the people, who people elect to make decisions on their behalf. And we will take all advice, but ultimately the responsibility is us. It's for us to do. So I want to thank Dr. Hazel Laws for being an excellent daughter of St. Kitts and Nevis, a remarkable professional who has come to the country, has settled down in a difficult job, and we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So I say thanks to her. I want to also say, in making decisions, it's not just the health personalities who give advice. We hear from the NEOC, which is a larger body. We hear, of course, from the security forces. Because when we are going to do things like these, we have to ask the Commissioner of Police and his High Command and the Lieutenant Colonel at the Defense Force. Can this be of assistance to you? How you are going to work it? Before we could make a final decision about zoning, we have to bring them in. Hear what they're saying, hear what the health personalities are saying, and see where there is symmetry, where there is commonality, where when there is difference, we could, as it were, bring some agreement and resolution. So the health personnel, critical resource. Security, a critical resource. Indeed, both of them are intertwined because the pandemic has raised a more significant health risk for security everywhere. And that is why one of the standard responses has been lockdown, as it were, the ports of entry. Do not allow other persons to come across the border unless it is properly managed. Again, I want to thank the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Your discipline, your hard work, your contribution to this effort has put us in a better place to be able to withstand the pandemic and to see a light at the end of the tunnel where St. Kitts and Nevis must emerge stronger, safer, and better for it. It has been a sacrifice for all of us, for me, for my cabinet, for each of us. But it is a sacrifice that could bring years of prosperous living to us. So, small sacrifice for future gains. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris, for your opening comments on Inside the News today. We'd now like to invite opening remarks from the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bacchus, for opportunity to give my own opening remarks this morning. On March 11th, 2020, the WHO declared the COVID-19 outbreak a pandemic, and our Honorable Prime Minister just described in detail the seriousness of the battle that we are all engaged in. And I want to use this opportunity at this time to underscore that in St. Kitts and Nevis, the Ministry of Health started its preparedness and response to this outbreak from as far back as early January 2020. As far back as January 23rd, we, the Ministry of Health, started strengthening our surveillance at our ports of entry. There has been early action and implementation of comprehensive public health measures, such as massive education campaign, sensitizing the public about hand hygiene practices, and behavioral changes like social and physical distancing to reduce the risk to coronavirus. Practices like rapid case identification, rapid testing, and isolation of cases, comprehensive contact tracing, and quarantine of contacts. At present, the Federation has one of the highest rates of testing per capita in the Caribbean. Let me repeat. At present, the Federation has one of the highest rates of testing per capita in the Caribbean. For the Ministry of Health, testing is a priority. We have suppressed the spread of COVID-19 below the threshold at which the health system becomes unable to prevent excess mortality. I want to use this forum to assure the public that we have a passionate team of health professionals seated at the Health Emergency Operating Center within the Ministry of Health, leading the Federation's response to this outbreak. We are not out of the woods as yet. Again, I repeat, we are not out of the woods as yet. The number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 will continue to rise. It will eventually peak, and we know that the way down is much slower than the way up. Dr. Carissa Etienne, the director of the Pan American Health Organization, in a press release dated April 15, 2020, warned the region to prepare for a full blast within the next few weeks. Dr. Etienne went on to advise that focusing on social distancing remained country's best bet to reduce transmission and slowing the spread of the virus. The declaration of the state of emergency in St. Kitts and Nevis on March 28 facilitated the required social and physical distancing measures. Yesterday, the National Assembly deemed it necessary to extend the state of emergency for a period of 6 months. Now, over the past Easter weekend, we had 6 days of 24-hour curfew. And during the upcoming week, we will have 4 days of partial curfew with limited days of operation between 6 a.m. in the morning and 7 p.m. in the evening. Now, this move can be described as a gradual relaxation of measures, and the Ministry of Health was guided by the World Health Organization in making this serious decision. The World Health Organization provided us with 6 criteria that countries should use to guide their decision-making process in terms of lifting restrictions. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to assure you that the Ministry of Health, we really studied these 6 criteria ahead of making our recommendations to the Cabinet. These criteria included, first, we needed to ensure that the transmission is controlled. Second, that the health system capacities are in place to detect, test, isolate, and treat every case and trace every contact. Thirdly, that the outbreak risks are minimized in special settings like health facilities, nursing homes, and other long-term care facilities. Fourth, that preventive measures are in place in workplaces, schools, and other places where it's essential for people to work. Fifth, that importation risks can be managed. As you know, our borders are closed. And sixth, that communities are fully educated, engaged, and empowered to adjust to the new norm. And so that's another reason why the Honorable Prime Minister and myself are here this morning. In essence, strict control measures can only be lifted if the right public health measures are in place, including significant capacity for contact tracing and testing and the legal framework for social and physical distancing. The key thing is to transition away from restrictions in a manner that will enable suppression of transmission at a low level, whilst enabling the resumption of some parts of economic and social life. And I want to end my opening comments with a little hope.
Yes.
When I woke up this morning, I usually try to find out the latest about COVID that's happening across the globe. And I was, pleasantly surprised by the article issued by Bloomberg.com. And the heading, Virus Vaccine May Be Ready for Mass Production by Autumn, Oxford professor says. Now, the article went on to say that a coronavirus vaccine trial by University of Oxford researchers aims to get efficacy results by September of this year. And they claim that manufacturing is already on the way. A team led by Professor Sarah Gilbert, professor of vaccinology at the University of Oxford, has recruited 500 volunteers from the ages of 18 to 55 years from early to mid-stage randomized controlled trials. It will be extended to older adults and then to the final stage of the trial, in which 5,000 persons will be recruited. And I quote, "We would hope to have at least some doses that are ready to be used by September of this year." And the article went on to say that the World Health Organization acknowledges 70 vaccine candidates on the market as we speak. And so for me, this is very, very hopeful. So thank you, Mr. Bacchus.
And thank you very much, Dr. Hazel Laws, for your opening comments. And we're now going to go to questions for the Prime Minister. We did ask people to submit their questions for us. So when you have the Prime Minister in the House, you want to get the best questions. So we have some questions here for the Prime Minister. And then, of course, we will take some calls from our listeners first. Mr. Prime Minister, are you ready, sir?
I am ready.
Excellent, sir. All right, the first question I have for you today. August 12th is the deadline for elections unless there are hostilities with another country. Is it, sir, constitutional to have a state of emergency beyond that date? That's your first question. I'm going to give you two at a time. The second question is, in the context of state of emergency, can you again explain why 6 months and not a shorter period, based on whether or not the 6-month window was based on the advice of medical professionals? Your responses, sir.
Thank you. I think the last one I will start with. For part of the explanation for the need for the extension of the state of emergency was given in the responses which our chief medical officer gave when she outlined the criteria that the WHO has set for relaxation of some of the restrictions. And in particular, she spoke to the need for the legal framework that would support the social and physical distancing. You need the legal framework. And the legal framework, by and large, is provided again in the emergency powers COVID-19 regulations. So that was essential. We could get in a never-ending argument about length of time. What I would say to you, that the Constitution provides for the state of emergency to go for a period of 12 months or shorter. What we have done, by and large, and the original draft which was produced by the Attorney General provided for 12-month period or shorter. So the first answer, we are acting within a constitutional frame, because that is what the reference to the August deadline for election is about, whether we are going to abide by the Constitution. And so by similar analogy, the answer as to the time for the state of the emergency is whether it meets the constitutional test. And that is, yes, it does. There's a second answer perhaps hidden. Was it a reasonable time? I would say, yes, it was reasonable. It was reasonable because it does no transgression to the Constitution. Secondly, the phraseology of the imposition was that it can be 6 months or shorter. So it means that it could be for 6 weeks. We don't know how long we will need it. It could be for 2 months. It can be for 3 months. Equally, it may well be that we may have to go back to the Parliament if certain unforeseen developments occur to ask for an even longer period of time. What is important is that we observe, as the CMO is doing, from day to day, what is the landscape like with respect to COVID-19. No one, not the CMO, not Dr. Tejas, who spoke this morning about it, not Dr. Etienne at Paho, knows how long this thing would last. All of them are saying, you must exercise precaution. What we have done is to provide a legislative framework that gives us ample room for the health situation to be under control. And I started in the beginning that our response to COVID in terms of emergency has nothing at all to do with the general elections. We have ample time. Why are we arguing about August? Let us try to live, because the COVID response is a day-by-day working a plan. Let us see how the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or even month of it will work. And then we could come back as rational beings and argue whether there is a need for a shortening of it or a lengthening of it. In any event, as the legislation is now drafted, it presupposes that there can be a shortening. The Attorney General was also absolutely clear in rebutting the nonsense and the false argument being put by the opposition that it was a stalling tactic, that at any moment in time, and I think he quoted Section 98 of the Constitution, the Governor General can revoke it. Indeed, the proclamation is in the name of the Governor General. It is the Governor General who must satisfy himself that the circumstances are such that there is a real and present threat as a result of the pandemic. I trust the good judgment of the Governor General every day. I go to him regularly for advice, and this matter I held extensive discussion with the Governor General, who is one of the most senior, thoughtful, knowledgeable, and brilliant minds alive today in St. Kitts and Nevis. He was our Attorney General prior to independence, and he continued as the longest-serving Attorney General of the country. He is the framer of the Constitution, so he knows it inside out. And even while we were debating, I called His Excellency the Governor General to get certain advice and input with respect to the matter. So I am very happy to say that the time frame of 6 months is very reasonable, and the time can be shorter, but we have to go week by week. Even while we are asking not to tie the hand of the professionals, the medical fraternity, the security fraternity, we are saying, where possible, let us do an easement. That is not the mindset of somebody who wants not to have the freedoms available so that an election can be called. We are, by this very move of easement, creating an environment of getting closer, approximating normalcy. Again, separate it from your mind, for I have separated it. I know what the law say. As a Prime Minister, I have to brief myself from time to time. I have professional advice on it, and I know all the options, or most of them, that are available to the country and to the cabinet. And for this moment in time, elections are not a consideration. My first job, and the first job of every government, is to protect its people. There is no constitutional invitation for a government to jeopardize the health of its citizens and residents for the purposes of an election. There is none. Nowhere will that happen. That is why we see, for example, and although I'm going there reluctantly, that even in Anguilla, opposition and government agree that they were not going to put the people of Anguilla's health at risk by focusing on an election. Because at this period of time, we need an all-of-society approach. Whatever contribution the opposition can make, they have been invited time and time again to come to the established structures and put forward their positions in relation to the matters. I have sat with the Chamber of Industry and Commerce before the onslaught of this, discussing, for example, the offshore sector and the Bankers Association. And when we had this, the Chamber of Industry and Commerce sent a letter congratulating the government for the stimulus package and say, at a reasonable time, because we know you are in an emergency, we want to have a dialogue with you. I've seen the lady president and said to her, we would welcome that. We have sat with the religious community, the evangelical, and the Christian Council. They have been some of the strongest supporters of the initiative. And we say, to God be the glory. So we don't have a situation where the police has to go into any church, as had happened in Antigua and in Jamaica, because people felt that they had a spiritual right not to go with the laws of the land, not recognizing that the legitimate authorities are ordained by God and they have a duty to obey. That is why you must give unto Caesar that which is of Caesar's. And so we have gone that road. 6 months quite adequate. And there is no relationship, to answer the first one, between this and the elections. Hopefully we will have enough time to have a discussion with respect to the elections and the way forward. For now, let us focus on saving lives. For saving lives, the life may be mine, it may be yours, it may be all of us. And if there is no healthy people, then there ain't a reason for us to be able to engage in a vigorous democracy to which we had hitherto been accustomed. I want to make the last point, that I believe strongly in the democratic systems. When I look at some societies in the Far East and elsewhere, and people put forward them as a model, I tend to tell people the discipline that naturally ignites in a society where there is a commandist infrastructure doesn't obtain in normal democratic society. And that is why for things like, for example, stealing and certain other voices and crimes, they hardly hear them being of any consequences in a society like Cuba or China or Russia. It just becomes alien in terms of the discipline and in terms of the power of the state to guide, to direct, and to control. And so when people, for example, look at Singapore model, look at China, look at this, you look at their history of engagement, and you know those societies, naturally societies bring a different form of adherence to direction and to guidance. And I want even to move, because it's not an attack on the systems, it's just looking at the realities of them. And every system have their highs and their lows, their good and the bad. But we can't take things out of their rich context. And that is why the WHO said, each country, these are the standard. But you have to do the delicate balancing between the lived reality of your people. If I were to go to Guyana, I've never ceased to be amazed at the amount of ground provisions that are there. And I always want my St. Kitts and Nevis to come like Guyana. That when you go in Pegasus, where I used to frequent, almost everything there is local. The beef, the this, the that. But that had come after many years of practice, where the Guyanese person was taught to buy and to support local. There was a national pride, a sense of national commitment, that you were a true Guyanese in a manner of speaking if you were supportive of certain things. The Burnham era was about the Guyanese clothes, the Guyanese attire, the Guyanese personality, and those things took a long time to get inculcated. I gave a long answer because
your answer is welcome.
Complex
question. Your answer is welcome,
Mr.
Prime Minister. I have two more for you before I go to the Chief Medical Officer, and there's a contention here that's been sent to me that suggests there's an argument from a lawyer that says the AG is wrong. Only the National Assembly can end the resolution passed by the National Assembly. So I'm just putting that there for you to consider. The other one has to do with assurances, and this comes from a gentleman who's asking, can the Prime Minister give assurances that political campaigning by the opposition would not be suppressed, and would he consider calling the date of the elections just to ensure there's calm in St. Kitts and Nevis. Your responses, sir.
Thank you very much. Again, we have to be careful what we wish for and whether we really need it. Because our model of democracy, and they're going back again to whether the AG is right or wrong, what we know is very right. In our model of democracy, the Westminster model, the prerogative in most countries is that elections are at the discretion of the Prime Minister to either go early or to go late within the context of the constitutional boundaries. And at this particular moment in time, when I've already said that I am not contemplating a general elections, there's nothing more I could add about timing. There's no time to give. There's no time to give. And there's no need for any lack of calm about it, because it is not in our constitutional fiber and practices for a date to be announced before the Prime Minister is ready. So this will not be introducing an abnormality. With respect to the advice from the Attorney General, that is a matter for debate. But in any event, for me, it is irrelevant. It is irrelevant because the provision says that the state of emergency would and can be for a shorter period of time. And also, at least up until May, as they have pointed to, we could go back to the Parliament and do whatever is necessary. And that is why I said, let us not get all caught up and frantic about it. Let us see how things work. Let us see how the first week goes, how the second week goes, and whether or not there is an imperative. Because, as it were, we still have cards to play. We still have cards to play. And however limited are the time, we still have time again to go back to the Parliament. And I have not taken anything off the table. Nothing is off the table. So it's not that that was the last Parliament. No. If I need to go to Parliament every week until I can't go again, I will. And even when the Parliament is prorogued, the Constitution allows His Excellency the Governor General to summon us back into session. So all is not lost. Let us not take any tool that the state has now off the table. Let us focus on getting St. Kitts and Nevis to the best place. Let us be clear that while people are into conspiracy theories, what is happening? The state is freeing up. The state is giving people an opportunity to shop not just for 2 days, but for 4 days now, and without the constraint of being in its own. So you can go about your legitimate business. More people are going to be working next week. More people in government are going to be out. Farmers are going to be out because the legislation has allowed for extended periods of operations. The bus drivers are going to be able, as part of the easement, to carry more passengers. From about 4, I think the figure is now 8. So more people can move. But even while that is happening, the things that the CMO said were critical, the weighing of the mass becomes even more important if more persons are going to be in public transportation. The social distancing becomes even more important. The sanitation becomes even more important. So we are saying to the busmen, have the sanitizer on the bus. And at frequent intervals, you wipe the knob, you wipe the seats, so that we are minimizing the transmission. That is the precautionary principle that Dr. Tedros and Dr. Carissa Etienne were talking about. And so, again, let us focus on our health. Let's focus on our safety and that of our families and community and the country. And at the critical moment, we could discuss other issues. Elections now are somewhat extraneous, not unimportant because it's part of the democracy, but that has its own time and sequencing. And none of that, as far as we know, is called into context by giving the legal framework to allow the social and physical distancing and all the other imperatives of quarantine and all those other things that are needed to take place so that the country can get to as near a state of normalcy as is important for us to have. In terms of political campaigning, I mean, the response of the opposition really has been starkly political, unpatriotic, but it's part of their freedom. The people will judge whether this is the right time, for example, when a leader of the opposition comes and says, well, pay the people more money. Is this the right time when people should be calling people to answer a call of duty, where every health professional, former and current, should be called to say, at a time of pandemic, would you lend your service to help us somewhere? The first response can't be, well, give us some more money. It's like a nation at war with arms and guns. And the people say, well, the soldiers need some money or they will not fight the war. Then, the country would have lost even before it started. And that doesn't deny that there may be an ample conversation about rewards, but it's the timing that is so indelicate, where duty should at its word be predominant. Duty should be the predominant motivator. We can't try to monetize it because the patriotism must loom large, that the person and the personalities bring everything to bear in this war against the pandemic. So I consider that to be responsible electioneering, which will have negative consequence to them. When the Labour Party puts out and invite people to go to Social Security, they are going to be paying your check at a time when one of the most critical things in the set of responses from the medical professional is social distancing. Why are you going to invite people to go to Social Security in numbers, to be disappointed, to get in a row, to imperil the health of the workers at Social Security and even their efforts? To me, the opposition is politicking, doing so at a time when the country needs to see national unity, or at least an effort to get there. Constructive ideas. They have not put one position paper to say, Madam CMO, you're in charge of the A3OC. These are what we would like to see. This is what we would like to do. She may say already, I have John Brown, but this is an area I think that you can do. That is her prerogative. They haven't gone to the head of the NEOC and say, can our services be used in health, in planning, in whatever area? Can we give some guidance? No. It's as if some persons want to hold the country to ransom and to put forward an alternative narrative at a time when there could only be one legitimate source of information in the context of war. That is what the WHO director says when he spoke about the misinformation campaign with respect to corona. He said the misinformation is as dangerous as the virus itself. And so when the opposition engages in nitpicking, it is bad politics for them. When instead of being helpful and constructive, they try to undermine and to stir disaffection in the health community and the country, they are not helping themselves. Again, the pandemic knows no color, no class, no region. That is why, as best we know, it originated all the way in Wuhan, China. Look, it's now here in St. Kitts. If you were to know some of the personalities, and I don't know who they are, but you hear names, you know it is no respecter of persons. I heard the distinguished representative for East Pasteur in Parliament identify two personalities. All of them our close family or associates of members opposite, but we are in a shared humanity. Their comfort becomes our comfort, and each one has to protect each one. I want to again say to the community, the government is focused on keeping you safe and protect you. The time will come for the party politics. In my view, it is not now, and I am not going to get myself sidetracked into a discussion of elections. That is not on the table at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. I have two questions for the CMO, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Hazel Laws. Dr. Laws, you mentioned the comments by Ms. Etienne about the what's coming in the way of the Caribbean, and you've just said St. Kitts and Nevis has reached all the criteria for some relaxation of the curfew, as will happen this week. What do you want to say to our listeners about your expectations as a health professional? And the second part of the question has to do with, of course, the Prime Minister made it very clear that unless there's some adherence to what's expected, there could be stricter measures. Now, some countries have taken the approach of having penalties for people who are found without masks in public places, and people who are not maintaining physical distancing have also been rewarded with fines. Are you at a stage now where you'll be considering perhaps making that sort of a recommendation? I can tell you, in moving around Bastille just yesterday, I saw clearly many people were adhering to your policies.
Yes.
But there were still a few pockets of most, not picking anybody, but particularly young people. I see the guys are watching a bit hard, but young people who feel invincible, and they gather around with their friends, and they take the mask down to speak. And after speaking, they put back up the mask again. I found it quite interesting. But to you, Dr. Laws.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bacchus, for your questions. And in terms of what are our expectations of the public come next week, and to put it simply, we are expecting each and every member or person who lives, who resides here, to exercise a high level of responsibility, personal responsibility in adhering to the measures that we have recommended in terms of hand hygiene, washing your hands before touching, commonly used surfaces, and wearing a face mask while in public spaces, and adhering to the social distancing and physical distancing recommendations. Maintain a nice distance of 6 feet between yourself and others. And even if you are amongst those who are essential workers, or if your organization requests that you come out, make sure it's your responsibility as an individual to adhere to social distancing measures in your workplace, irrespective of the circumstance. And so we expect individuals to buy in and adhere to the recommendations that we have made. You asked about penalties. From where I sit, I would prefer individuals to recognize that it's an all of society response, and as an individual, you recognize the importance of your role in all of this. And so I don't think I want to go down the road of penalties, but if we have buy-in, and it's all about empowering your friend and your neighbor. And so if you're wearing your face mask and you see your friend not wearing one, engage the individual in terms of, okay, so what's happening? Is it that you're unable to source one? Well, I can give you one. And I think we are our brother's keeper. And it's important for us to reach out to those who may not be in compliance, engage them in conversation, encourage and motivate. And I think everybody will be on board if we take that attitude.
And Dr. Laws, my second set of questions for you.
Sorry, before you
Yes,
go,
Professor.
just to say that the regulations, statutory rules and orders number 14 of 2020 at regulation 15 says notwithstanding the provisions of the Small Charges Act at Chapter 4.36, a person shall wear a face mask covering their nose and mouth when in a public place, once a period of emergency is declared in relation to COVID-19. So there's a Small Charges Act. Normally you wouldn't see people wearing them. So it says, notwithstanding that, this is what you're required to do in the period in which there is an emergency in relation to COVID-19. And that goes back to the point of what yesterday was about. An emergency specific to COVID-19 and not with respect to the elections. And then I want to take you to Regulation 18, and I will try and get a copy for you, Bacchus. There should be online though. It says, 19, there is a penalty.
Penalty, yes.
A person who contravenes or fails to comply with these regulations shall be liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $5,000 or a term of imprisonment not exceeding 6 months, or to both, or to forfeiture of any goods or money in respect of which the offense has been committed. So there is a regulation and there is a penalty. Like Dr. Laws, I don't want us to have to take people to court for wearing a mask, to pay $5,000 when you could get a mask for $5, for $10. You could even make your own. I've seen people take parts of their clothing before and make their own that covers their nose and covers their mouths, and all will be well. And this is the point. These are common sense things which are so simple to do as ABC, but yet some people will not do them. And that is why there's a need for emergency powers that give you the legal mechanism to act with some degree of rapidity to protect those of us who are in compliance. Just wanted to add that for completeness.
Ali, thank you very much for that, Mr. Prime Minister, because sometimes you need to be very clear that yes, you're not interested in hurting anybody,
Right.
but there must be compliance for the safety of everybody. Now, in the context of frontline workers, and this is again to Dr. Laws, we take our hats off, of course, to the security forces, the very, very many departments that work very late, the media workers, everybody else. Some of the guys are here. But the medical professionals, the health workers, are even closer on the line because they're treating people who are potentially contagious. What can you say to us about personal protective equipment for healthcare workers in the context? How do you define that? How does it work? And is it something that you have to change regularly? Do you have a supply of it? Could you just educate us about that, please?
Okay, thank you for that question, Mr. Bacchus. Personal protective equipment is the term that encompasses the goggles, face shields, the N95 mask, and the gown that's worn by health professionals who are in direct contact with COVID positive patients, the gloves and the cover shoes or the overshoes. So again, I repeat, it encompasses the goggles, the face shields, the N95 mask that's worn over the nose and mouth, the gown that's made of an impenetrable material, the gloves, and the overshoes that's worn by the health professional who is required to be in contact with a COVID positive patient. And so how much do we need? We need as many as we can get, because this is the gear that is worn by all the health professionals who are on the front line in terms of this fight. And as you rightly said, those individuals who are going out to collect samples from suspected cases, going out to interview these contacts and take samples, they have to wear the PPE. And those emergency medical technicians who would be called on the ambulance in response for somebody who is having difficulty breathing. They have to wear the PPE. When that individual arrives at our emergency room, the PPE is worn by the nurses and doctors in the emergency room. And if the individual is admitted to the isolation ward or the private ward at our JNF General Hospital, the PPE has to be worn by the nurses and doctors and the members on the health team who will be providing care on the ward. And so this is worn almost in every contact and interaction with the individual. And so every shift, when the nurses and doctors come on every shift, they have to be properly attired. And so if per se we have 5-10 patients on the COVID isolation ward, we can consume and utilize thousands of PPE within a short space of time. And so we would require as many as we can get. In terms of recycling, now these items, they come with their own directions and recommendations from the manufacturers, and most of them are for one-time use, and so recycling is not advised.
Now, if anyone is listening to us now would like to make a contribution for a health worker in the context of PPEs, how can they do that?
Okay, so that's quite simple. You just make contact with the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health, Dr. Dolores Stapleton Harris, or myself, or even the National Disaster Coordinator, who is chair of the COVID-19 task force. So it's pretty easy.
Are you taking donations as well online? I have some people in the diaspora who may want to help out. They can't leave home.
So that's fine. That's fine. That's possible also.
All right. So I would like to take a break now, Mr. Prime Minister. I'll give you a few moments, and Dr. Laws as well. We'll take a break. We've been going for about an hour. Give you a chance to take a break, and then we're going to come back. We're going to have the headline news now. We're going to come back for the second part of the program. And callers, I know you're a bit frustrated, but when we come back, we're going to go straight to the phone lines, unless the Prime Minister has an announcement to make.
We got to the phone. No, we got to the news.
We go to the news.
NFL Headline News is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, KDP Enterprises, The Grange, Carib Brewery, CNC Trading,